In the north of Europe, the Baltics and the Scandinavian lands constitute one of the most critical lines of defence against Russia. The safe delivery of military aid to Ukraine has become a key element of the European Union's defence strategy. However, Russia continues to challenge Europe not only on the front lines, but also on the logistical lines. Sabotage in the Baltic Sea, attacks on fibre optic cables and the mobility of the Russian Navy in the region pose a serious threat to the European Union. This is where the Nordic countries of Finland, Sweden and Norway are working on a massive logistics project to build a more secure connection to Europe. The Helsinki government aims to create a direct route to Europe with bridges, rail and road lines across the Baltic Sea. But is this project really feasible? How can Finland's plan reduce Russia's influence in the Baltics? And could these alternative routes enable faster and safer delivery of military aid to Ukraine? We will now take a closer look at whether this is possible and in which direction there could be connections between Europe and the Nordic lands. We will also look in detail at the implications of these common logistics routes for Russia. But first, please do not forget to subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and give us a like to stay up to date with our content. Let us start now. The Baltics and the Scandinavian territories are among the best blocking zones for Russia at the moment, especially in the context of the European Union's efforts to stop Russia without the support of the United States. The Scandinavian power is of great importance. Finland, Sweden and Norway are important suppliers to the Baltics and from there to Europe. The fast and safe delivery of military aid from the Nordic region to Ukraine is seen as a critical element for Europe. This is because risks such as logistics costs and Russia's sabotage on connection routes worry the European Union first and the Baltic and Scandinavian countries second. Norway, for example, recently announced that a huge wealth fund of $1.7 trillion will be used for Ukraine, and military aid will be provided through this budget. The Swedish government announced that it would provide Ukraine with 13.5 billion krona, or around 1.23 billion United States dollars, in funds and equipment as part of the largest military aid package to date. The Stockholm government announced that it would increase the number of Stridsbot 90 combat boats donated from the Swedish Armed Forces stockpile to 32 boats, and would send 1,500 Toau anti-tank missiles and 284 anti-tank guns. Finland announced a military aid package worth more than $200 million. This was Finland's 27th military aid package to Ukraine. So, how does all this military aid, main battle tanks, armoured infantry vehicles, missiles, weapons and bullets reach Ukraine? Are there viable, low-cost and reliable ways for this military aid from the Scandinavian lands to reach Ukraine? And how far away are these alternative routes from Russian sabotage threats? As you know, the Russian Navy and the Shadow Fleet can deeply monitor and intervene in the logistical activities of the Nordic countries through the Baltics towards Europe. Most tragically for the European Union, Russia can even access and damage submarine fibre optic cables in the Baltics. Normally, Russia also has the potential to affect logistics from Scandinavia to the European Union. Nowadays, the Nordic powers have put this critical issue on the table and have started important work on a common connectivity route with Europe. Finland has been at the forefront of this. The Helsinki government has made news by presenting shocking projects to connect the Nordic lands to Europe. For Russian President Vladimir Putin, these projects will perhaps have an even stronger impact than nuclear weapons. This is because the Finnish projects not only aim to connect Scandinavia to Europe in order to deliver military aid to Ukraine, but also to dramatically increase economic ties between the two sides. Finland is considering options to build a bridge across the Baltic Sea, as well as road and rail links to Europe. With this project, Finland's connection to Europe could be further strengthened by a new line across the Baltic Sea to its neighbours Sweden and Estonia. The Estonian connection would probably be a Helsinki-Tallinn route. The Swedish route is under discussion in the Confederation of Finnish Industry. A new report published by the Confederation of Finnish Industry recommends building a bridge or tunnel between Sweden and Finland in the context of rising geopolitical tensions and European Union plans to connect the continent. Tiina Haapasalo, chief policy advisor for transport and infrastructure, said that Finland needs to secure maritime transport in the Baltic Sea while creating new logistics routes and secure connections to Europe. If there is any tension in the Baltic Sea, alternative routes will be needed, Harpasalo said. The lobby group wants the Finnish government to launch a study focusing on 3 fixed link options to better connect the country to the rest of Europe via the Baltic Sea. The 3 proposed routes include a tunnel or bridge between Helsinki and Stockholm via Turku and the Åland archipelago, and an underwater tunnel between Helsinki and Tallinn. A possible Helsinki-Stockholm link could also connect to Copenhagen via the Øresund Bridge. What was once considered a far-fetched idea is now seen as a success, with a record 7.5 million toll station passengers in 2024. Connecting Copenhagen and Malmö, the bridge is a critical artery linking Sweden to the rest of Europe. When the bridge first opened in 2000, it was met with much fanfare after more than a century of negotiations. Since then, it has transformed travel and trade between Denmark and Sweden, setting a precedent for future large-scale Nordic infrastructure projects. With an average of more than 20,000 road crossings per day, the bridge generated a profit of €215 million in 2024. From a geopolitical point of view, the situation has really changed, and this has brought a new light to the debate. So there is a stronger push from the Finnish side. Now, Finland's project to connect to Europe via Sweden and Estonia could recreate the dynamics of all these routes. The Finland-Sweden and Finland-Estonia connection could increase the importance of the route between the Danish capital Copenhagen and Malmö. All these connection routes could strengthen the Baltic countries' spiral with Europe and create more resilient logistics lines against Russia. However, experts say that an infrastructure project involving different countries will require a long research process and will face challenges. If we are talking about a project from Sweden to Finland across Åland, it would probably be much more challenging than the Øresund Bridge, which is actually quite simple. However, analysts say that the proposed connection is not impossible and would drastically change the economics of transportation in the Nordic countries, especially between Sweden and Finland. Coming back to the broader political aims of closer cooperation between the countries, there is no doubt that it would be welcomed. This massive project could drastically change the economic geography of southern Finland and Sweden and undermine Russia's plans to reach the Baltics. It is also true that there could be more rail and road transport to the European continent via Denmark and Germany, so the transport capacity on the Swedish side needs to be analysed. The Finnish government could issue an immediate call to action to emulate infrastructure and development projects in the rest of Europe, especially now that the Russian threat is so close to Europe and then to the Nordic lands. The Helsinki government should do something about it so that the risks can be further contained. The Fehmarnbelt tunnel, an 18-kilometre rail and road link between Denmark and Germany, will speed up rail journeys by 2 hours and road journeys by more than 1 hour when it is completed in 2029. With this project in mind, Finland can already start building Helsinki-Tallinn and Helsinki-Stockholm routes. Other projects scheduled for completion by 2030 include Rail Baltica and the North Bothnia Line, which will provide high-speed rail traffic to Warsaw via the Baltic states and establish an electrified double-track railway between the Swedish cities of Umeå and Luleå. According to the Finnish public broadcaster Yle, the Finnish government has allocated €200,000 for feasibility studies for a connection between Umeå and Vaasa in 2024 in an area called Kvarken along the Gulf of Bothnia. A report on the feasibility of this connection is expected to be published this year by the Finnish Transport Infrastructure Agency. Of course, this fixed link could have some economic impact on both regions, but at the moment, for example in Finland, the economic impact at the national level seems to be rather small. This is because the existing maritime transportation system is currently very efficient. Experts argue that Finland is dependent on exports, and with almost 100% of its exports going through the Baltic Sea, it suffers from a major weakness in transportation links. With all these details and data in mind, it would be incredibly critical for the stronger Nordic geography and the Baltics, and for Europe as a whole, for Finland to realise such logistics routing projects. Moreover, as we have mentioned, Finland's potential projects will visibly break Russia's dominance in the Scandinavian and Baltic regions. In the long-term perspective, Russia is likely to maintain its military build-up in both the Baltic Sea and the Arctic. Following the accession of Finland and Sweden to NATO, Russian military thinkers and planners increasingly see the two theatres as contiguous spaces. Around the Baltic Sea and in the Arctic, NATO member states must be prepared for an ever wider range of military responses as they confront Russia's aggressive policies. These responses will be designed to deter and destabilise NATO member states, with the explicit aim of forcing the latter to change their policies towards Russia. Finland's common logistics link would serve to level Russia's playing field in the Baltics by pushing Sweden, Estonia and Denmark further into the forefront. In fact, it has long been clear to NATO that Nordic power would bring distinct advantages to the international military alliance. Thanks to the accessions, these advantages have admirably strengthened NATO against Russia. The accession of Finland and Sweden to NATO has simplified the organisational geography. Russia now faced a full set of NATO member states in both the Baltic Sea region and the Arctic. Russia is surrounded by 8 NATO members in the Baltics and 7 in the Arctic. Surrounded by NATO countries, Russia provoked this unwanted development with its illegal invasion of Ukraine in 2022, and its aggressive policies towards a long list of neighbouring countries, including Finland and Sweden. The Baltic Sea region and the circle of NATO member states in the Arctic, 12 separate states in total, with the Kingdom of Denmark, Sweden and Finland in both regions, contain some of Russia's harshest critics and some of Ukraine's most ardent supporters. This fact has elevated the two regions to ever more prominent positions in the Russian public debate. Simply put, there is a very long list of political preferences and decisions within and between the 12 NATO member states that Russia will seek to influence and undo. In February 2024, in a highly symbolic step, Russian President Vladimir Putin reintroduced the Leningrad military district. This region was involved in some of the most controversial Soviet military activities, including the invasion and occupation of independent Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania, and the Winter War against Finland. Its reintroduction largely reflected a political desire to capitalise on its many conflict connotations. Another desire was to signal a more focused approach in the northwest strategic direction, including Sweden and Finland and the Arctic. Since only 2 of the main doctrines underlying Russia's approach to the Baltic Sea region and the Arctic have been revised since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, experts have relatively little in terms of official guidance. However, a revised naval doctrine was signed by Putin in July 2022, followed by a revised foreign policy doctrine in March 2023. The naval doctrine claims that Russia's implementation of independent foreign and domestic policies has led to opposition from the United States and its allies, and adds that Russia should increase the combat potential of the Northern Fleet and develop its basing system. The foreign policy doctrine points out that Russia should neutralize the course of unfriendly states towards militarizing the Arctic and limit the possibilities for Russia to exercise its sovereign rights. The foreign policy doctrine also invites non-Arctic states that pursue a constructive policy towards Russia to join Russia in the Arctic. This is seen as a concession to China, which is seeking to increase its influence in the Arctic. The broader debate in Russia, as expressed in both academic and commentator communities, is more alarmist and aggressive. It is strongly communicated to the Russian public by the Kremlin regime that recent developments, in particular the admission of Finland and Sweden to NATO, are unacceptable and must be dealt with, including militarily by the Russian military. A frequent argument is that the previous rather precarious military balance has been disrupted by both enlargements and other anti-Russian measures taken by NATO as a whole, and by the 12 Baltic Sea and Arctic NATO member states acting individually or collectively. The measures are said to be a combination of conventional and combined military activities designed to further weaken Russia's position in both theatres. Russian public opinion is being led to expect that the Russian military will take this up now and even more forcefully after the end of the war in Ukraine. The accusation that NATO member states are using mixed measures against Russia is seen by Russia as legitimizing the use of unconventional approaches. The Kremlin has already used this strategic approach since the beginning of the war. This central element of the Russian military's thinking about the Baltic Sea region and the Arctic is absent from publicly available sources. The Putin regime is managing this plan behind the scenes. In order to achieve various effects, the Russian regime is considering the use of so-called hybrid tools covering the physical, cyber, and cognitive domains. The combined effect of these operations is such that the heads of government of NATO member states have said that even if they do not see themselves at war in January 2025, it is no longer a time for peace. The Russian literature on hybrid warfare is rich, but in essence, it can be summarized as creating a state of controlled chaos. The extreme fusion of state, controlled and private, military and civilian, kinetic and non-kinetic assets in Russia offers military planners a wide range of opportunities when trying to impose controlled chaos on other Baltic Sea or Arctic states. The focus of these latter states is largely on the protection of undersea cables and pipelines. On January 14, 2025, NATO announced the establishment of a Baltic Sentinel, including surface ships and maritime patrol aircraft, to monitor and protect this critical infrastructure. This NATO initiative represented both defence and deterrence against Russia. The hybrid attack vectors in the Baltic Sea region and the Arctic are so numerous, and Russia's comprehensive approach to the use of hybrid means is so well established that Russia should be expected to continue to operate in this way. NATO member states need to be cognizant of the fact that this is not only about the maritime environment, but also about the land, air, cyber, and even information domain. Both the Baltic Sea region and the Arctic are regions of great military importance and symbolism, and Russia will tend to maintain its military build-up in both theatres. This is why the ideas that Finland is working on, bridging Estonia and Sweden, creating a submarine passage, would give NATO a great advantage over the European Union. These Russian risks in the Baltic and Arctic can be gradually eliminated by Finland's projects to connect the Nordic lands with Europe. Through these routes, not only Finland, but also Scandinavian countries such as Sweden and Norway can provide military assistance to Ukraine through safer routes under the European Union doctrine, thus undermining Russia's authority in the region. Thank you for watching.